Welcome to AI in Action, Exploring Tomorrow's Tech Today, the podcast where we delve into the groundbreaking world of artificial intelligence. I'm Mari, and with me is my husband, Jim. With our combined expertise in technology and education, we're here to guide you through the AI revolution. Whether it's the latest news headlines or transformative AI applications in classrooms, healthcare, and beyond, we're here to make sense of it all. Together, let's uncover how AI is reshaping our world from everyday encounters to the future of work. So let's dive in and explore tomorrow's tech today. All right, welcome to episode 5 of AI in Action. So, Jim and I are here today to talk to you about, of course, the latest headlines. So, Jim, before we started with this podcast, I just asked you, I said, okay, we're going to focus on education in today's podcast. We're going to give an educational update and talk about some tools and things like that specifically for education, because that's what AI Ed Pro does. I mean, that's our little thing we're doing on the side above and beyond our regular jobs in a K-12 institute. But I said, Jim, if you were going to tell our listeners the latest, greatest, the latest and greatest, tell me.
Well, I mean, I get a lot of different news feeds and stuff like that, and some weeks are very active and some weeks are not. But I think this time the stuff that seems to be getting people caught my interest was Llama 2 just got released, which is the latest open source version of a large language model from Facebook or Meta. Meta is taking a very different approach than other companies are taking. They're not really even discussing closed source, and they're making, they just did a kind of a corporate license to where people can actually, like a typical open source thing. Yes, you can use this in a corporate, you have to apply to get approval to it, but you can still use it. So I think that's pretty cool, pretty exciting. The partnerships with Meta are kind of interesting as well. I read that they're partnering with Qualcomm. If you don't know who Qualcomm is, they are a chip manufacturer. They used to be the chip supplier for most of the cell phone industry. And I don't know that they still are because Apple's making their own stuff. But the fact that they're talking about in the next few years being able to run an offline large language model on a phone that's pretty challenging and very interesting as well. If you think about having something a whole lot better than what they currently have for helpers like Siri and stuff on your phone. Microsoft also has some kind of announcement where they're partnering with Meta as well. I think Microsoft's hedging their bets. They're saying they're looking at all this legislation and discussions of legislation. A lot of it has to do with openness and the ability to understand where the AI data came from that trained it. And since Meta is kind of the big player right now in providing that kind of open source access, Microsoft's going, okay, we're going to partner with them, and we're partnering with the more closed source OpenAI. It seems like a smart move to me for them to kind of play both sides of the fence. Microsoft's been doing that for a long time with the open source world. They went from hating it to embracing it in many ways. So this is another way for them to do that.
So in a nutshell, first came all of the technology, and now we're seeing how everything's going to partner up and how they're going to be helping each other, and they're going to be like forming new bonds amongst all the companies.
It's like going to a dance. At first everybody's standing around the edge of the gym, and then suddenly people start pairing off and dancing or being with certain people. Well, everybody's picking their dance partners.
Okay, something else that just happened that I thought was kind of cool is there's something that came out with ChatGPT that for me makes it easier to use. And that's like, I can now tell it to take on a persona, like I am a second grade teacher. And then it's going to always assume that I am talking to it from the point of view of being a second grade teacher. And that way I'm not always having to tell it over and over again, what it is that I'm wanting it to do.
Right. Well, I call it persona. I think they call it context, but you have to have the paid for version. This is not available in the free version, but there's a way to go into the settings. It's one of their many beta functions. You go in there, you check this box, and basically there's a text field. You enter in, like you said, I'm a second grade teacher, or you're a helpful assistant, or whatever it is you want to say, and then it assumes that to be true until you delete it. So the nice thing is that spans across threads. Most of the time now you can set a persona or a context in a single thread and it'll stay with you. but if you open a new thread, you have to retype it. So this keeps you from. I mean, it seems like a very handy feature. I don't know if it's the killer feature, but I think one of the things that I like about what OpenAI is doing is they're, instead of talking all the time about GPT-5 or what's next, they're taking what they have and incrementally making improvements to it, which I think is a great idea.
Hmm. You're hearing, gonna hear our puppies in the background on this podcast. They're up here helping us out. So let's switch from what's just in the general news and let's start talking about an education update. So we, that is our love. That is what we are here for, is education, educators. It's what we do.
We do it
So
every single day, and we've been doing it between the two of us for over 30 years, but individually about 18 years
exactly.
each.
So one of the reasons and one of the things we wanted to talk about was basically education. As an educator, when I see a new tool, I'm always like, oh, well, it's not going to be here for very long. It is going to go away. It's it's happened to us before in the industry where we've adopted something and within a couple of years the company goes under and it's gone. Well, artificial intelligence, as we have said before, is not going anywhere.
Well, and we see a lot of discussions about, what type of technology is this? Is this the same as, blockchain and the various things that are associated with blockchain, or is this? There's dozens of other things that we've talked about, and the answer is no. And we talk about that when we do training. This isn't the same thing as those. We spend a lot of time telling people this is different. And the article that we thought was interesting had to do with the type of technology. The article's term was leapfrog technology. I caught my attention because I thought it was interesting, because I remember, especially with iPhones, but I remember even with Excel and Word, which is a really long time ago, where people were avoiding, in companies especially, they were avoiding adopting some of these new technologies. And people just kind of ignored them.
Right.
It was too
Well,
useful.
it made their job easier, so they started using it on a personal basis.
Mm-hmm.
So that is what a leapfrog technology is something basically that it just exactly what the word says. It's gonna leap over all of the naysayers, and it's gonna
Changes
be
the
here.
paradigm. It's a new paradigm. It leaps over the current paradigm of whatever you're doing and does something completely different. And for me, it caught my attention because one of the phrases they used was, "Are you going to let this technology in the front door or the back door?" And I think that's an important thing to think about, because a lot of like even the iPhones, I remember, I was traveling a lot doing presentations all over the world, and there was a lot of discussions about Apple. And there was an agreement with most people that there's no way corporations are going to allow people to use these iPhones. They're not secure. They're a consumer device. They're a toy, not a tool. And back then it was BlackBerry. That was the secure tool. Does anybody even remember who BlackBerry was? I mean, it was a great tool. It was a great phone, very secure, but just wasn't as convenient. So guess what? All the current technology that was at the time for cell phones just kind of got pushed aside, and people just started bringing their iPhones to work. Corporations adapted, schools adapted. That's the way it works.
Right. And there is going to be a wide adoption of artificial intelligence in things simply because the tools that we are accustomed to using, like Excel and Word and just all of our everyday office products, they are integrating artificial intelligence into those tools.
Yeah, I think the bottom line for us is that there's too much money, there's too many corporations, there's too many things going on for it to go away. One of the next headlines that I thought was that next one kind of caught everybody's attention.
About Apple. I mean, Apple, what is it? What's the process? What's the technical term for the phone that has it in it? Has the neural net.
Oh, you're talking about their M1 chipset or
the
whatever.
M1 chipset.
Has neural circuitry, whatever that exactly means in there. But basically, you and I talked about it. It seems like the last big conference that Apple had, it was such a contrast between the Google conference. Everybody made fun of it. In Google, the CEO of Google said the word, it counted, it was like 114 times they said the word
AI. Or artificial intelligence.
Apple said it's 0.
Right.
And so everybody's like, well, Apple, they're behind.
They're not ready.
They're not ready. Apple's a hardware company. They have software, but they'll tell you that they're a hardware company.
Well, the software they have is written by other people that's then put on their app store.
That's part of it. I mean, their operating system, they write their operating
Well,
system,
yeah.
but they don't. They're not typically, as a whole, they're not a software company. They make a lot of money on other people's software, but they provide a platform. It's a walled garden they provide for people to run their apps. And so Apple ignoring it was a big deal. And everybody's like, oh, Apple's behind. And then all of a sudden, now there's this little thing that came out saying, well, guess what? There's an Apple GPT, which there's no way that Apple's going to call it that. They're going to call it, they may not just call it, they may call it Super Siri. I don't have any idea what they're going to. But the fact that they laid the foundation
A
in
long
their
time ago.
chips a while ago when they released, I think that's kind of interesting. I think it's got potential for Apple to maybe have a better chance of running these large language models locally on a phone versus others.
What I think is interesting is that they didn't mention it. It's almost like they didn't mention it on purpose because they're
That's
all
Apple.
going, well, guess what? We've been doing this for a long time.
Wow,
We're
that's
not
got
going to
Apple.
mention it until we're ready to mention it.
Apple likes doing that kind of stuff, like hiding
So,
things.
and Microsoft, on a Microsoft blog recently, I talk about how they're going to put it in no matter what. Microsoft Bing.
Yeah, Bing Chat's been around for a
been
bit.
around.
I don't. It's not one of my favorites. It works okay, but this announcement's kind of odd to me. I don't really think I understand it very well because they're saying they've got a Bing Chat Enterprise and a Copilot pricing. One of them's like $30 a month per user, which is the enterprise, and one of them's $5 a month per user, which I guess is the Copilot for just anyone who has Office 365.
That's going to be tough for educational institutes
It is.
to swallow the $30 per user.
In our school, we have what 300 employees. Assuming that we paid for each and every one of them, it gets.
Yeah.
I mean, that's a monthly pay check that's going out. That's not an annual check.
Hopefully, they'll come up with something for K-12
Probably.
education.
I hope they make Bing better too. Bing's really not that great. I don't want to pay for it. That's for certain.
All right, so that's just why we're saying that education, artificial intelligence, it's here to stay. It's going to come in the back door if we don't let it in the front door, which kind of leads us to one of the next little articles that really caught my attention concerning artificial intelligence. It was from a thing called, it was a report that comes out, and they did like a weekly newsletter, a weekly report about the state of education, and they get a lot of their information from the U.S. Department of Education. And according to this, they're saying that the U.S. Department of Education, while they are incorporating generative AI into K-12, they're encouraging the teachers to just experiment with it, but almost like just barely put their toe in the water to
slow roll.
Do it slowly.
Yeah,
they're telling teachers in this article specifically, it's like, oh, just use it for a couple of lesson plans, maybe, don't jump in. And as a teacher, I'm sitting here going, or as a previous teacher, I'm sitting here going, if I want to stay ahead of my students, I should already be in the deep end.
Yeah, I read the article, and I know it bothered you, and I read the article, and I agree with you. I mean, there's a few points in there that I could certainly see their point of view. However, I think their point of view is wrong, and I think it's wrong because teachers are drowning. I mean, we're in it every day. I teach teachers, you teach teachers, you've been a teacher very recently, and teachers are drowning in paperwork. It's
Absolutely.
just so much of it. And this feels like an attempt to kind of put the onus of learning it back onto the teacher and saying, we just want you to play with this stuff and get used to it, get comfortable with it, and then we'll educate you more on it later.
Well, it's like
we'll train you more on it later.
The policymakers aren't wanting to take on the responsibility of making the policies. The policy, and when I say policymakers, I am talking about what I was at one time when I was a principal.
Just administrators.
An administrator. We don't want to take the time to necessarily learn it or to make the new policies or to make the new trainings or to go out and hire the companies like AI Ed Pro, to hire people like us to come in and train the teachers on what this is doing to education. So we're going to say, oh, well, let's just do a slow adoption. Here, teacher, here's the latest website you can go to. Why don't you play with it for a little while? Let me know if you think it's good. Let me know if you think it's interesting. Come back and tell me. And then next year, we might do some professional development on it. But the whole time all of this is slowly rolling out, the kids are using this, and we need to get ahead of it so that we can teach the kids how to use it in an ethical way, how to use it as a tool, how to change the paradigm of their learning. And the teachers need to be taught how to use it so that they can take some of the I'm drowning in all of the paperwork off.
Well, I kind of like, I'm going to brag on our own school district some, but I mean, they're letting us have a lot of freedom to train the teachers on how to do this stuff, and they're encouraging it. And they're not saying, let's slow roll this and let's be afraid of it. And I think the approach that everyone should take is, if you want to slow roll it to the students, I agree. I mean, having a tool available where the school, officially says this is good for students, I can see where that would be scary. But teachers, they know, and if they don't know, we can teach them how to use these tools safely and effectively and to keep from drowning in all that paperwork. And the slow roll approach makes the teacher more fearful. And that teacher's like, oh, wait a minute, there must be something about this that I don't understand. Or the schools are offering training, even the ones that they mentioned in this article, they're talking about training, but it's not a very aggressive form of training, because the whole context of the training is we're going to take it real slow, which is, if you're a teacher drowning and somebody goes, hey, you know what? Let's slow roll that. Then they're going to go, yeah, I'm going to put that over there on that pile for now because I got enough to do. I'll play with it a little bit. And then I'm just going to, do something else.
Well, that actually happened to us the very first time we gave AI training. We took a
Good.
small group of teachers at, like, I don't know, quite some time ago.
Mm-hmm.
And we gave them the information about AI. And then I followed up with those teachers 2 or 3 weeks later.
And only one had touched it.
And only one had touched it because they, at the time, just didn't really understand what it could do for them right now on a day-to-day basis.
And that's what we emphasize so heavily in our training. That's what we encourage people when you're doing training. Don't be so timid about using these tools, but again, focused on the teacher. How do we get that workload off the teacher? Anyway, one of the things that we believe why we believe this is so important is it's that front door versus back door thing. You can slow roll it through the teachers all you want to, but the kids are not going to slow roll it. They're not going to go, oh, you're right. I should learn how to use this ethically before I touch it. No, they're not. Not the kids we've talked to, not the kids we've seen, even the kids that have worked for us this summer. All of them are saying, I'm going to use this thing every chance I get. So there's a lot to it.
When we were discussing this article earlier, I made a comment about the seniors. If I am a teacher at a K-12 and I am teaching seniors and I am slow rolling artificial intelligence, therefore I am pretending that my students don't already know about it, which we all know they do, and I'm not going to use it in my classroom, I'm not going to teach them anything about it. When they go to college after their senior year, they are not going to be adequately prepared to use the tool that AI can be for them.
Right.
So just to reiterate, even though you and I don't agree 100% on how we felt about this article, we believe you should not go slow with artificial intelligence.
For teachers.
That's because correct. It's not going to go away. So you need to dive in and learn it.
Either the train runs over you or you're on the train, but one way or the other, the train's coming past.
Yes.
So.
All right. Talking about education. Latest on the hot topic and why everyone's so scared of it is cheating. Students are using AI to generate work.
Yeah, we had a long discussion about that the other day because we have nothing else to talk about but AI. And we were talking about cheating, and it obviously in our trainings, I keep mentioning them, but we do a lot on cheating because it is the hot topic. And one of the things that we talk about a lot is the process versus the tool. There's a lot of tools out there that talk about, and that's part of that slow rolling article they read. They're like, there's already tools out there that will detect it. You're good. Well,
that's not.
One article I read, there is a website that I found, and they literally call themselves Undetectable AI. What is their purpose? Well, they actually didn't build theirs to help kids cheat. At least they don't say they do. And I don't think they did. there are a lot of magazines, businesses that are seeing people generating content, even websites, seeing people generating content using AI, and they're telling people not to do that. So if you're at work and you're on a deadline and you're trying to do it, but you know that they don't want you to use AI, well, this particular tool will help you make it look less like an AI. So when you turn it into your boss to be published, you can't be accused of using AI because the detector is not going to detect it. My point is there is a always in technology a war between the detectors and the things that are trying to get past the detectors. This is no exception. And the AIs that are developing to detect AIs are happening just as fast.
Right. And
So
it's not just about assignments. Let's think about it. We're not just talking about typing in a paper about something. There are things out there now that are doing, like, what about video assignments? Or I know PowerPoint has put in an AI component where you can have an AI help you with all your PowerPoint presentations.
yeah,
How are we going to detect that?
yeah.
So, I mean,
You can't just drop those into one of these detectors not easily.
right. And then you're looking at the paradigm of, okay, people who haven't been in the classroom in a long time, some of the administrators might say, well, you're just going to have to, teach it a different way. You're going to have to give a different type of assignment. You're going to have to assess that they're learning it in a different fashion. And that's all well and good until you get to the state assessments that aren't changing.
Not soon.
Not soon. So I really feel for the teachers because they're still having to teach so that the kids can pass all of the standardized testing. But now they're also going to have to try to figure out how to make sure the kids are learning the content without the kids using AI to cheat on everything. So
Yes, it's a process, not a tool. That's what we're going to say over and over
over and
again.
over and over.
So, you asked me to look into what's changing. I know I took kind of a different approach because there's a lot of stuff, a lot of tools. We wrote a book about AI and integrating AI into schools, and we talk a lot about the tools in there. And we even probably said it in the book that everyone who has a tool that has anything to do with education, especially, is going to change they're going to put the word AI in there. They were
Mm-hmm.
probably using some form of machine learning before because they wanted to get better,
Quizlet.
like Quizlet was.
Quizlet's been using AI
But
since 2020.
but they weren't called AI back then. Just like security cameras they call it analytics. Now they're going to call it AI. So everybody's putting that in there. And one of the articles that caught my attention was one from Kinder Lab Robotics. I think it was a blog post. Why should you teach AI in early childhood? And what was interesting, what I thought was interesting about the article is they were trying very hard to minimize the AI. They wanted to compartmentalize and take this particular tool and put it into a much smaller bucket and saying, in a larger context, this is just about computer science, digital literacy programs. You got to just add this into those and you're good. Well, first of all, I don't agree with that. They are part of that. I agree with, but they're much bigger than that in terms of how they can impact how we interact with knowledge. So I don't think you can just do it. I do agree with them in the sense that the farther back we can teach it and then show it as a tool and teach digital literacy, I believe that's important. But I just don't completely agree with the assertion that you can just call this computer science or any more than that training you went to where the person giving it kept calling it, well, it's like machine learning. It's like Siri. Well, there is some level of machine learning, and you could even argue AI associated with Alexa or Siri, but this isn't the same thing. This is a natural language interface, which maybe Siri's got that, but it's also about generative AI. It's
Mm-hmm.
about taking existing knowledge and generating something new
Mm-hmm.
from it. Whereas those
It's not
other
a
tools,
query and get back a set response.
that's correct. Somebody had to program those responses. These are not it's just different. To me, it's different. I mean,
Right.
other people may disagree. So I thought that was an interesting article
Okay.
to put in there.
Yeah, and I agree though that the earlier you start it, the more it becomes second nature to the student to
Google
use it
that.
as a tool.
Just like Googling it. It's like Googling it. Yeah.
Right. Universities. There was an article about the University of Georgia that's using it to assess the creativity of something that a student turns in. Now, we have mixed emotions.
I do. Not as I have more than you do.
Well, for gifted and talented students.
We call them GT kids.
Or GT kids. It's the university is going to attempt to create a better system for rating their students as GT. Now, I did all of the GT testing for several years at elementary level. And especially once you get to a certain point in the testing paradigm, that you need to assess outside the box thinking, a portfolio or something like
I
that,
just
I
feel like
can see how AI could be helpful in
they're
doing that.
talking about, they call it assessing creativity. I'm the one who put the term GT in there because to me it felt an awful lot like it. One of the mixed emotions I have about GT is it always seemed like an attempt to pigeonhole kids either as GT or not GT. We have three kids. One of them tested GT, the other two didn't. It feels a little weird to me. I've never really liked that, the whole idea of doing that. But yet again, I can see your point. I
Yeah.
mean, you do want to assess, you need to give enrichment, which we built a fairly complex enrichment system at Lano. And we felt like that those kids needed some level of enrichment. I think you've told me many times the kids that tend to be high on that assessment of creativity also tends to be the troublemakers sometimes in
They're
class
bored.
because they're bored
Mm-hmm.
and they don't feel like they're getting anything out of it. So they get the homework, they get the work done quick, and now they're sitting there, throwing the pencil at the kid next to them.
Right,
So
right. That they
I can
get
see
bored
that.
fast.
I can see that.
So we are pretty much at the end of our podcast for today. Is there anything else that you would like to add?
Well, we talked a lot about, you and I have, about all these different tools. We're seeing all these different tools available for educators, and we've added some of it into our trainings. There is a gazillion different websites out there where people are offering something for teachers. We can generate tests for you. We can generate quizzes. We can do this. We can do that.
Is that not just a GUI that they're putting on top of the AI?
In a sense it is. We don't focus on that in our training. And the reason we don't is because it's one of those things where it's like you mentioned earlier, we've had tools that come and go at the school district. And these people that are doing this at the back end, they're using, unless they're getting real creative and using Llama or Llama 2, I like that word, Llama. They're using GPT in the background. They're using APIs. Those APIs don't tend to be free. And because they're not free, that means that every time somebody queries it through their free tool, they're paying for those tokens that are getting used. And you can't sustain that. You have to have programmers. You've got to pay your bills, which means they have to charge you for it. The question is their business model sustainable to where they can make enough money, or they're going to get bought by somebody else, which some of them will? I think it's better to learn the tool that is there. It's free. It's the big one.
So
I
the
don't
back
see
end.
I don't see ChatGPT going away anytime soon.
Well,
It's a great tool for them to figure out how to make their tool better. We've got Bard, we've got ChatGPT, we've got Claude, we've got all these different ones. They're not going away, and I think it's better to learn how to use those tools effectively because they're not going to go away. These other ones, pretty user interface as well.
Basically, you're saying learn the tool that's behind the curtain of the people who are basically using that tool to and putting just a pretty front end on it to make it easier on you, saying sign up for free, and then 6 months from now, all of a sudden it's not free anymore, or you start getting ads, or how it is that they are putting butter on their bread. They have to do that.
They got to pay their programmers. They got to pay the people doing this stuff. I mean, the great thing about AI is maybe some of these people doing it are the programmer themselves. But it also, you got to host it in the cloud. I mean, getting these things refined and getting them out there, all of it costs money. And that means they have to eventually make money. And I'm not saying they shouldn't. They should make money. I'm saying is, if you're going to learn this stuff, learn the fundamentals of if you don't let us teach you, then let others teach you the fundamentals of prompt engineering or prompt generation or whatever term you're comfortable with. You can learn how to do this stuff. It really isn't hard. And if you learn how to do it, it doesn't really matter if these other guys go. Unless even when it gets integrated into things like Excel and all that other stuff, or these other tools, at the end of the day, you're still gonna have a natural language interface. You're still gonna have a prompt that you have to generate, and so on and so forth. Learn the tools. You'll be much happier doing it that way, and they're so easy to learn. It's not. Use the ones that are free if you want to, but just don't become too dependent on them.
Yeah. So what you're saying is, if you learn it at the base level, if you find a tool that you really like the interface, you can start using that tool, no problem. But that way, if the tool ends up going away, you still have the base knowledge that you can fall back on, so that you don't just
or do what I do. Use that tool and I go back and forth between lots of different tools because sometimes I don't like the answer. Sometimes the answer's not complete, or sometimes it doesn't know how to do something the way I want to, or I think that's one of the problems that I have with the tools that are coming out there that are putting all these guardrails and bounding boxes around it, specifically for teachers. I think that at the end of the day, you've got to be willing to learn the basics.
All right, that's it for today, guys. We really appreciate you listening in, and hopefully you will catch us again next Monday for AI in Action. Thank you. And that brings us to the end of AI in Action, exploring tomorrow's tech today. We're Mari and Jim, your guides on this exciting journey through the world of artificial intelligence. We hope today's conversation has left you with fresh insights and a deeper understanding of how AI is shaping our future. If you enjoyed our discussion and want to stay up to date with the latest in AI, make sure to subscribe and share the podcast with your friends and colleagues. Remember, the future is not something that just happens to us. It's something we can actively shape and influence with knowledge and action. So let's continue exploring, innovating, and taking action. Thank you for joining us today. We look forward to sharing more exciting AI developments with you next time on AI in Action, exploring tomorrow's tech today.